podcast.
Yep.
We are on episode 2 of Tale of Ten Toes.
The Tale of Ten Toes.
Where we talk all about our son Thomas. And to kind of fill you in from episode 1, if you haven't been able to see it, was that he went into the ER, we thought was just a virus, and we're very wrong. He had a ruptured appendix, and he had 3 abscesses. He had went septic that night, and he had really low blood pressure and really high heart rate. And so all of those things combined is not a good mix. And so we had emergency surgery that night. And I remember the next morning we they laid us down that night and gave us a really, really awful turkey sandwich. And
can of Coke, some apple juice.
Gave us a blanket and
something
said,
to kind of
good night, parents.
Calm me down.
Yeah. And so we woke up the next morning.
Yeah, and that was like 3:30 in the morning.
It was to bed. Very early.
It was
or late, however you want to look at that.
I mean, it had been a long night. We'd kind of passed the first hurdle, the first battle. We'd made it past that point.
Yeah, so we felt like we could actually sleep.
Yep, finally. He's alive. We know that he's alive.
He's alive.
The next thing was that they had to stabilize him, and then we'll move on from there. Yeah. And so for us, we were exhausted. I mean, we had cried 1,000 tears, and we were just done.
Yeah.
And so at that point, they gotten us to, have a sandwich, have some, apple juice or Coke or whatever, kind of get your blood sugar back up, kind of get you settled down, because we had not ate, we had not done anything. And then they said, here, you guys can share a small, petite, uncomfortable couch that folds out.
Oh my goodness.
And so about 3:30 we ended up going to bed. 6 a.m. we were back awake, and
we had our first, that was one of our first pastors showed up, was at 6 a.m.
Yeah.
I think a lot of them had woken up to the news and were very shocked, as you would be. And so 6 a.m. was the first pastor that showed up. And that day was Father's Day.
Yeah.
And we had, I lost count, probably 5 or 6 pastors that day come through.
Yeah.
And it was also a Sunday morning, and it was like they just rotated almost every hour. There was someone new coming. But it was really good to have that community, but also it was really tough because you don't know how to act, you don't know how to put on that brave face because you're not feeling very brave at that point.
No.
You're very, very low.
You're exhausted.
Yeah.
You're feeling all of the emotions. You're excited because he's alive. You're depressed and scared because he's in a hospital, you know. You're angry, you're tired, I don't know, you're all over the place.
Yeah.
And it's not like you just feel one emotion, you're feeling all of them at the same time. And so I think the first 3 days we lived off of coffee and adrenaline.
Yeah. So that first day, I mean, I remember the doctors, they did the rounds. And they were just like, we're so thankful he's here, but he, this could quite easily go south. And they come in, they said, honestly, I can't give you good news today.
Well, every day, the blessing is that we had some of the best doctors and surgeons.
Very
I mean,
good.
our surgeon was, our head surgeon was the foremost in the state. And she was highly skilled, a lot of wisdom, a lot of knowledge, and all of the nurses and doctors bowed down to her. I mean, she walked in and she owned the room.
Yeah.
She owned the space, and everybody acquiesced to her. She made the final calls and decisions, and she was absolutely the authority on him and his case.
Absolutely.
That being said, when we first met her, every day, we would start off and she would come in the morning and what would she say?
Well, guys, Today's probably
today may,
today
he may
might
not
be the
make it
last.
today. Maybe
Today
his
he
last
might
day.
die.
We just need to,
All the ways that you could say it, and I'm like, it was very blunt.
Yep.
But that's
she
the
was
kind of
very,
personality that she had.
absolutely. She was very accurate. She wasn't going to fluff us up. She wasn't going to, she was just speaking her truth from her medical background.
Yeah.
And that was that, hey, you know what? He could die.
Yeah.
And the tough part is, as parents, you're fully aware of that. When you walk in the room, it's like, I know today could be the last day. You look at
him and you go,
yeah, like,
yes.
You know.
But, that was really hard to hear every day,
Well, because it's
every time she come in, it was the same
it's
scenario.
the same scenario, the same message, the same, and it was really hard, and it was not.
Yeah.
It did not feel healthy.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
But that first day, I mean, there was just he had 2 IV trees. Sorry, medical professionals, if I said that wrong. But I mean, he had so many lines and IVs and different things that it wouldn't fit on one. He had to have 2 IV trees. And just the sheer thought about that. And he's only 1.5 years old. I'm like, there's only so many places this could go,
Right.
But there was antibiotics and pain meds and they needed different access to him, and so there was just so much stuff on him. But he's fully sedated. He has no idea any of this has happened, and which is probably for the best. I mean, he went through so 100%. Much. But the first few days, it was like, okay, so after they would tell us that he's going to die that morning, they would say, okay, we're going to try this one last thing, right? Well, so I'm like, okay, great. Give me that one thing we need to do.
Every day is a battle to fight, right?
Yep.
Every day is a battle to fight. And I feel like we would end the day and it was like, well, we've won on that front. Now let's figure out, how to win the war. Yeah. And every day was a new battle. Every day was a win somewhere.
Yeah.
I don't think we ever had a day where there wasn't some win, small or large. There was something that,
I think so. Yeah.
But it's like you could win in one area and then the following day, whatever you did to win is the problem for the new, right. It's like this drug cures this problem, but its side effect is this, and now that's a new problem.
Right.
And so you're always going in circles. And the poor child, he's one and he's got little tiny, arteries and veins and
very, very tiny,
kidney functions and heart function. And there was so many things going on. And so, that all contributed and led to where he was at. And the initial thing was we had to get the fluid out of his abdomen. We had to get all the toxic fluid, all of the...
Which that drained for
days.
Another, I want to say up to a week.
Yeah. And it was,
so much. I was literally just shocked at how much was in his system.
Well, and it was a combination of its, infected fluid and pus and fecal and also, it's just everything was corrupted and everything was, backed up. And so getting that fluid out, getting him, he had all the IVs. And so they're keeping him hydrated, but then his kidneys weren't functioning. And so he wasn't urinating. And so
they were worried about that.
Another issue that you're fighting with is trying to get, his systems back functioning so that he can, process things, get the organs. And then his heart, that was the other issue, is his blood pressure was really low. And so they had put him on like a reverse blood pressure medicine. Yeah. And they said it would help to take the blood from his extremities and force it towards the heart. And the goal was to try and get the heart back to where it needed to be and then work from there out. And so, again, every day, something new, something we're fighting. Yeah.
Yes. Those long days there.
Yeah. And I think we made it about 3 days, and every day our surgeon would come in. Well, guys, it's not good. Today could be the last day, you know? And so I think somewhere in there, maybe day 3 or 4.
I'm trying to remember what day this was.
Yeah. It was early on. Every day she gets so mad. Oh, she gets so mad. Because then the surgeon would leave and, come in this room, tell me my son's going to die. And then she was angry. She was an angry mama bear.
Mama bear.
And so you know, I think it was around day 3 or 4.
Yeah.
You know, one of the, not the lead surgeon, but one of our.
It was the PICU head doctor on the floor. There was a couple of them that would rotate. And so this particular one I was very fond of. She'd come in the room at the end of her shift, which was kind of abnormal, and was just talking to us. We were just standing around his bed, and she was just chatting with us, seeing how we were doing, which, you know, that personal connection is just, I'll always remember that.
Yeah.
But there was a point where she said, "Do you guys need anything?" And I thought, this is it. And I remember looking at you and you looking back at me, and then like I just felt like the green light went on, you know, like the Holy Spirit was like, let's do this, you know. And I opened my mouth, and I remember saying, you know, I told her, I said, the surgeon keeps coming in. I said, I highly regard her.
Yeah.
But we cannot be talking like this. I said, in this room, we will speak life.
Yeah.
Here, we're life.
We're painfully aware of his health. We're painfully aware of where he sits.
We can see him.
We can see him. We know that it's not okay.
Yeah.
However, that doesn't mean that you walk in here every day and you continue to tell us. You know, well,
and I told her, I said, take me in the hallway, take me in the conference room, take me in your office, anywhere else. We can have, you know, if it comes to the point where we need to have an end of life conversation, I want to have that conversation with you. I need to be able to have communication with you. But in here, we're going to speak life. And I think that really put, you know, she was kind of like, oh, kind of taken back a little bit. Because then she immediately was like, well, I noticed that you're a praying family. And I just, that brought me so much joy because they see it. And she said she goes home and tells her daughter, who was only 9, that, you know, of cases that she's been working on and why mommy is working these long hours and stuff. And so I was really honored that she wanted to take Thomas's story home with her.
Yeah.
And have her daughter pray over us. Like, that's just unheard of. And those are the moments that stick with you through all of these things. That God was just teaching kids how to pray for Thomas.
Yeah.
And
the kids, our kids were at VBS that week.
They were.
And even at VBS, they
sent me a video and I just broke down. But they had, from stage, the children's pastor from stage had stopped what they were doing and said, let's extend our hands and let's pray for Thomas. Thomas is sick. And our daughter, Anna, was at this VBS. She's in the midst of all these kids praying for her brother. Like, dude, that got me so much. Because I know most of those kids personally, you know.
Right.
And that was just, it was a moment where I was going, okay, Lord, you're doing something. You're really, really doing something. So that was a pivot in our story because once I said to that doctor, I said, here we speak life, that has stuck with us. Because I just opened my mouth and it came out, you know.
Yes, but look at the cause and effect.
After that, the effect, yes.
Because that surgeon came in and she was a
totally
very different personality.
Yeah.
She was still all of the things that she needed to be. She was the authority. She was wisdom. She had all of the stature, but she had a kindness and a softness that was not displayed.
Yeah, it was different
in the earlier stages of our stay. And, you know, we still were able to have hard conversations as needed, but they happened in the hallway.
They did.
You know, and then in that room, you know, we spoke life.
I remember the first day after that conversation, the next morning, she came in, because I remember this so vividly. She came in and she goes, how are you guys doing? How did Thomas do overnight? It was almost like she was putting her trust in us.
Yeah.
And it was different. And we were, oh, well, this is what Thomas did. And I remember saying to her, well, I'm not the doctor, but I did notice this, you know? And so she was like, okay, well, you know, we're going to do this today. This is going to be our aim, our goal for today. And I love that she kind of took that and took charge and said, this is what we're going to do today. And she didn't focus on the negative. She focused on how he was going to benefit from that plan.
Right.
I loved that because he started waking up. Like our little boy started coming back to us.
Yeah.
And I noticed little glimpses, like he would open his eyes just ever so slightly. And, you know, it was slow, but I noticed a change.
Yeah.
It was a definite change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that was the first, essentially that was the first week that we were there that this went down.
Yes.
And then, you know, coming out of that first week, that's when we hit our next big hurdle. And that was where we talk about the tale of 10 toes.
Yeah. I remember because, you know, he had the PICC lines in his like his groin area.
Yep.
And, you know, he's 1.5. He has tiny little veins. He's got low blood pressure. So there's not a lot of pressure of the blood coming through.
Yep.
And he's on so many medications.
Well, and the needle.
And the needle is big.
It is big because it is
what it is.
That was one of the main lines, and they said, you know, it was the smallest needle
I think it was the arterial line.
But he had such small, you know, I mean, those veins and stuff are so small.
Yeah.
And so in the process of them, again, talking about the blood pressure medicine, you know, early on they were trying to get that heart rate back up and get that blood pressure back up. Well, that pulled from the extremities to bring it back up to the heart.
Yeah.
So we started to notice that his right foot was starting to turn black and blue.
Yeah.
And then it was starting to turn black. Purple.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it
started purple, then it went.
I mean, the long story short is it was dying. They discovered that he had developed a blood clot in that thigh area where that line was. And so now you've got all these new issues introduced, right?
Very much.
And so one of the issues is the blood clot cannot get back to his heart, because if it gets back to his heart, it could kill him.
Right.
Another issue is that his foot is dying. It has, at that point, they were using an ultrasound machine to try and hear, you know, the blood flow at his foot, at his ankle, behind his knee, and different places, and trying to see like where is the blood flow stopping? Where is it not making it?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, in the meantime, his foot is becoming like necrotic. It's dying.
His days of no blood flow.
Yep.
I mean, it is.
So they are trying to get that back.
And the other thing they were saying was, they're like, you know, the toes are dying.
Yep, because they're the furthest.
But they're like,
extremity.
we don't want it to keep progressing, because then he'll lose the foot.
Well,
and that they're talking about. This was I was a little mama bear here too, but they were like, you know, Mom and Dad, we're gonna probably have to look at amputation.
Right.
And I'm like, no, he's gonna walk out of this hospital.
Yeah.
And they're like, okay, I understand your positivity, but I'm like, no, he is gonna walk out of this hospital. And never for a moment did I think that we would have to undergo that painful loss.
Well, you know, we just went through an entire week of like saving his life and getting him back from the brink of death, and now all of a sudden we're talking about amputating his foot.
Yeah, I'm like, no, we're just not going to go there like that. No, but it had been days and days and days of no blood flow, and they of course had to move the line to see if that would help get the blood flow back.
Yeah,
but. You know, they tried all the conservative measures because the vascular surgeon said it's too risky to go in and remove this blood clot. He's too sick. There's way too many risks. So she said, I would much rather do a conservative measure. And so they used what they call, I think it's called a bear hug. Yeah, I'm not sure if it's right. But it's just
a air blanket, right?
It's just basically a little... Yeah, little blow up mattress. Like,
that they would kind of wrap his leg in and it blew hot air in there.
yeah, they would cover him
Try
up
and
with
get
that. Just kind of
circulation directly
attract
to
some blood flow. And
that area. Yeah.
so, they started checking his foot, like every hour, every 2 hours?
Every hour. They come
something
in.
like that. I mean, it was just all the time. And I just remember a couple of our pastors had come and brought you some chili because they knew that you love chili.
I did. It was delicious
It was
chili.
so good.
It was a magic recipe.
It was. But they had brought that for us, and they're like, well, let's pray over Thomas, before we have to leave. And so we're the four of us are standing there praying, and a couple of us have our hands on Thomas, and the surgeon, it's like an assistant. She was another surgeon that works with her. She come in and she's like, oh, I'm sorry for interrupting. I said, you're not interrupting. I said, you do what you need to do for him. And she said, well, I'm just going to Doppler his foot, while you guys are here. And I said, if you don't mind, we're just going to keep praying. She said, oh, yeah, go for it. And we've heard this, we experience this every hour, right? So
Yep.
we kind of knew what was going to be happening. And so she goes to Doppler the foot, and we just kind of paused. And I remember in those moments, we're asking God to bring the blood flow back to his extremities. We're saying, God, save this foot, save this toe.
Yeah.
And in that very moment, God says, okay. And then the Doppler goes, and you hear, it's faint, but it's there. Yeah, there it is. Our little sound effects, man. But you can hear it, like his blood flow is returning.
Yeah.
And I remember just feeling like I jumped a mile high. I don't know, probably didn't jump high at all. But I remember being just the excitement in the room. It was just an overflow. And then this doctor, I love that the doctor was there while it happened, that she was able to see the miracle of Thomas's foot come to life.
Yeah.
And so there's so many moments of that in Thomas's story, and just moments of miracles that God stepped in and changed the narrative.
Yeah.
So I guess we'll continue this part 3. Do you want to do a part 3?
Yeah.
Let's do a part 3.
Well, because we got to get to the part of the story where where we get him back home.
Yeah.
And, so we've been through so much with him.
Yeah.
Let's talk about him coming back out of.
Yeah.
We'll talk about him. We'll talk about what happens with his toes. And I would love to tell the story of him, and the exit from the hospital and what all of that looks like.
Yeah.
And also, just give people an idea of what was going on with us throughout that experience as well.
For sure.
Absolutely. So we will see you guys in the next episode.
Part 3.